The screech of metal against asphalt cut through the morning air like a blade. Steam hissed from the overturned school bus as Marcus Chen dropped his lunch pail and sprinted toward the wreckage, his construction boots pounding against the wet pavement. Inside the twisted yellow metal, children's cries pierced the silence while smoke began to curl from beneath the engine. Most people would have called 911 and waited. Marcus didn't have that luxury of time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The intersection of Maple Street and Industrial Boulevard had claimed 3 accidents in the past year, but nothing like this. Marcus Chen had been walking to his shift at the construction site when the delivery truck ran the red light, clipping the school bus and sending it rolling down the embankment. The sound would haunt his dreams for months to come. Without hesitation, Marcus scrambled down the muddy slope toward the overturned bus. His weathered hands, scarred from years of manual labor, found purchase on the emergency exit at the rear. The glass had already shattered, leaving jagged edges that bit into his palms as he widened the opening. Blood mixed with rain as he called into the chaos. "Stay calm, kids! I'm getting you out!" One by one, he pulled the frightened children through the narrow opening. A boy with a broken arm. Twin girls crying for their mother. A teenager with a gash across his forehead. Marcus's 38-year-old body protested with each lift, but he ignored the pain shooting through his back. He'd felt worse. The last child was trapped beneath an overturned seat near the front of the bus. She couldn't have been more than 12, her long auburn hair matted with blood, her school uniform torn and dirty, but her eyes, bright green and alert despite the trauma, met his with surprising composure. "My leg is stuck," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Marcus crawled deeper into the wreckage, feeling the bus shift ominously with his weight. The smell of gasoline was getting stronger. He braced his shoulder against the seat and heaved with everything he had. The metal groaned, shifted an inch, then 2. The girl pulled herself free just as sirens wailed in the distance. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer from the way she winced. "I don't think so," she admitted, trying to put weight on her left ankle. Marcus didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms and carried her toward the opening, his muscles screaming in protest. As they emerged from the wreckage, the first fire truck rounded the corner. EMTs rushed toward them, but the girl's hand clutched his sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied, gently transferring her to the paramedic's stretcher. "Marcus Chen." "I'm Emma," she said, her green eyes never leaving his face. Emma Whitfield. The name meant nothing to Marcus. He was too focused on making sure she was breathing properly, that her pulse was strong. The paramedic assured him she would be fine, probable concussion, definitely a sprained ankle, but alive thanks to his quick action. Marcus nodded, picked up his dented lunch pail from where he'd dropped it, and walked away. He had a job to get to, and he was already an hour late. Marcus Chen's story began 23 years earlier in a cramped apartment above a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. His parents had arrived in America with nothing but hope and an unshakable work ethic. His father, Wei, washed dishes 16 hours a day, while his mother, Lin, took in sewing to make ends meet. They spoke broken English, but fluent sacrifice. When Marcus was 15, his father collapsed from exhaustion at the restaurant. The doctor said his heart couldn't take the strain anymore, but they couldn't afford the surgery that might save him. Wei Chen died 3 months later, leaving behind a widow, a teenage son, and medical bills that would take years to pay off. Marcus dropped out of high school to work at construction, his dreams of college dissolving like morning mist. He told himself it was temporary, just until they caught up on the bills, but temporary became permanent when his mother was diagnosed with diabetes. Her medication costs consumed whatever money he might have saved for his education. At 25, Marcus married Sarah, a nurse he met at the free clinic where he took his mother for checkups. Sarah understood struggle. She'd grown up in foster care, bouncing from house to house until she aged out of the system. Together, they built something neither had experienced before: a real family. Their daughter Lily arrived 2 years later, a perfect blend of her parents, features with her father's determined spirit and her mother's gentle heart. Marcus worked double shifts to provide for them, coming home each night covered in dust and cement, but always with enough energy to read Lily a bedtime story. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday when Lily was 4. Sarah had been complaining of headaches for weeks, dismissing them as stress from her nursing job. The seizure happened without warning during breakfast. By the time Marcus got her to the hospital, it was too late. The aneurysm had been hiding in her brain like a ticking bomb. Marcus suddenly found himself a widowed single father with no idea how to braid hair or help with math homework. His mother moved in to help, but her health was declining. Some nights, Marcus would sit at the kitchen table after Lily fell asleep, staring at bills he couldn't pay and wondering how other people made it look so easy. He never complained, never asked for help, never let Lily see him cry. Every morning, he packed her lunch in the same dented metal box his father had carried, kissed her goodbye, and went to work building other people's dreams while his own seemed increasingly out of reach. The construction site where Marcus worked was developing luxury condominiums for people who made more in a month than he did in a year. He installed the hardwood floors they would walk on, built the walls that would shelter them, crafted the spaces where they would make memories. It was honest work, and Marcus took pride in doing it well. His co-workers respected him. Marcus was the guy you wanted on your crew because he never missed a day, never cut corners, and always had your back when things got dangerous. He'd been on the job for 12 years, watching younger men get promoted while he remained steady, reliable, invisible. The morning of the bus accident had started like any other. Marcus dropped Lily off at her elementary school, kissing her goodbye and reminding her about their movie night plan. She was 8 now, smart as a whip and twice as stubborn. She'd been asking questions about college lately, wondering if she could be a doctor like the one who couldn't save Mommy. "Daddy, will you help me with my science project tonight?" she had asked, her backpack nearly as big as she was. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll work on it after dinner." Marcus had no idea that this promise would take on new meaning before the sun set. 3 blocks from the construction site he heard the crash. Metal twisting, glass shattering, children screaming. Every father's worst nightmare echoing off the buildings. Marcus ran toward the sound before his brain could tell his feet to move. Later, the other construction workers would say he disappeared for 3 hours. The foreman docked his pay, but Marcus didn't care. He'd saved 13 children that day, including one whose name would soon become very important to him. Emma Whitfield had never ridden a school bus before the day of the accident. At 12 years old, she was accustomed to private cars with drivers, exclusive schools with armed security, and a world where ordinary people existed mostly in the background of her carefully orchestrated life. Her grandfather, Theodore Whitfield, had built an empire from nothing, starting with a small electronics repair shop and growing it into Whitfield Industries, a multinational corporation worth $37 billion. Forbes called him a visionary. Business, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Magazines featured him on covers. Politicians sought his endorsement. But to Emma, he was just Grandpa Theo, the man who taught her chess and bought her books about astronomy. Emma's parents had died in a plane crash when she was 7. The corporate jet, piloted by the family's trusted aviator for over a decade, had encountered unexpected turbulence over the Rocky Mountains. There were no survivors, no final goodbyes, just a phone call that changed Emma's world forever. Theodore had raised her since then, pouring all his protective instincts into keeping her safe from a world that he saw as full of people who would use her name for their own gain. Emma attended Whitfield Academy, a private school he'd endowed specifically for children of his employees and trusted associates. She had bodyguards disguised as teachers, friends who were carefully vetted, and a life that was safe but increasingly isolated. The morning of the accident, Emma had finally convinced her grandfather to let her experience something normal. Her best friend at Whitfield Academy was Madison Torres, whose father managed one of Theodore's manufacturing plants. Madison rode the public school bus to her dance classes across town, and Emma had begged to go with her just once. "Please, Grandpa Theo," Emma had pleaded over breakfast in the mansion's formal dining room. "I want to see what it's like to be a regular kid, just for one morning." Theodore had hesitated, his weathered hands gripping his coffee cup. At 73, he'd built his fortune by taking calculated risks, but this felt different. This was about the person who mattered most to him in the world. "The security team will follow at a distance." He'd finally agreed. "And you'll call me the moment you reach the dance studio." Emma had kissed his cheek and promised to be careful. She had no way of knowing that careful wasn't always enough. The bus had been filled with the usual chaos of children heading to various after-school activities. Emma found herself fascinated by the casual conversations, the shared snacks, the easy friendships that didn't require background checks or security clearances. For 43 minutes, she felt wonderfully, completely normal. Then came the impact. Emma remembered the sensation of weightlessness as the bus left the road, the sick feeling of rolling over and over, the way everything in the world seemed to move in slow motion except her racing heart. When the motion stopped, she found herself trapped beneath a seat that had torn loose from its bolts. That's when she saw him. A man in work clothes and muddy boots, crawling through the wreckage toward her while smoke filled the air around them. His face was kind but determined, his hands gentle despite their rough appearance. He didn't ask who she was or where she came from. He just saw a child in danger and acted. When Marcus lifted that seat off her leg, Emma felt something she'd rarely experienced in her sheltered life, the pure, unconditional kindness of a stranger who expected nothing in return. Most people who helped her did so because they knew her last name, because they wanted something from her grandfather, because there might be a reward involved. Marcus Chen had no idea who she was, and it didn't matter to him. That realization would stay with her long after her ankle healed. At the hospital, Theodore Whitfield arrived within 20 minutes of the accident, having moved heaven and earth to get there. His security team had lost the bus in traffic and hadn't witnessed the crash. The first he knew of his granddaughter's danger was a call from the hospital identifying her as one of the injured children. Emma was conscious when he rushed into the emergency room, his silver hair disheveled, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled from running. She'd never seen her grandfather look scared before, but his hand shook as he took hers. "I'm okay, Grandpa Theo," she assured him, "but you need to find the man who saved me. His name is Marcus Chen." "We'll find him," Theodore promised, though his primary concern was making sure Emma was truly all right. The doctors confirmed a concussion and a severely sprained ankle, but no permanent damage. She would need to stay overnight for observation, but she would make a full recovery. As Emma drifted off to sleep that night, she thought about Marcus Chen's calloused hands and kind eyes. She'd met presidents and movie stars, dined with diplomats and Nobel Prize winners, but she'd never met anyone quite like the man who risked his life to save hers. The next morning brought a parade of reporters, flowers from well-wishers, and calls from family friends expressing their relief. But Emma's first question was still the same. "Did you find Marcus Chen?" Theodore's security team was efficient, but they'd uncovered information that gave him pause. Marcus Chen, age 38, construction worker, widowed father living paycheck to paycheck in a modest apartment across town. No criminal record, no outstanding debts except medical bills from his late wife's treatment. A man who appeared to be exactly what he seemed, hard-working, honest, and struggling to get by. "We found him," Theodore told Emma as she picked at her hospital breakfast. "He works construction downtown." Emma's eyes lit up. "Can we go see him? I want to thank him properly." Theodore hesitated. His instinct was to send a check, maybe arrange a meeting in controlled circumstances. But looking at his granddaughter's eager face, he found himself agreeing to something he would never normally consider. "We'll go see him," he said. "But we'll be discreet." Neither of them had any idea how much this decision would change their lives. Marcus learned about Emma's identity the way he learned about most things, through casual conversation at the construction site. Jimmy Rodriguez, who worked the crane, had a cousin who worked security at City General Hospital. The cousin mentioned that Theodore Whitfield's granddaughter had been on that school bus Marcus had helped with. "Whitfield?" Marcus paused in his work, the hammer frozen in his hand. "As in, Whitfield Industries?" The same, Jimmy confirmed. Richest man in the state, probably. Word is the little girl keeps asking about the guy who pulled her out of the bus. Marcus felt a strange twist in his stomach. He'd saved a billionaire's granddaughter and had no idea. The girl with the green eyes and steady voice, the one who'd thanked him so politely, came from a world he could barely imagine. That evening, as he helped Lily with her homework at their small kitchen table, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma Whitfield. Did she live in one of those mansions on the hill? Did she have tutors instead of teachers, servants instead of family? The idea seemed surreal, like something from a movie rather than his actual life. "Daddy, you're not paying attention," Lily complained, tapping her pencil against her math workbook. "I asked you to check this problem 3 times. "Sorry, sweetheart." Marcus focused on his daughter's homework, pushing thoughts of green eyes and family fortunes out of his mind. His world was here, in this cramped apartment with its leaky faucet and creaky floors, helping his daughter learn multiplication tables, and dreaming of a future where she wouldn't have to struggle like he had. The next evening brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus was fixing dinner when the knock came. Through the peephole he saw a well-dressed older man and a young girl with auburn hair. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized Emma, though she looked different in expensive clothes with her hair perfectly styled. He opened the door, suddenly aware of his worn jeans and paint-stained shirt. "Mr. Chen," the older man said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Theodore Whitfield, and I believe you've already met my granddaughter Emma." "Hello, Marcus," Emma said, her smile bright and genuine. "I hope we're not bothering you." "Not at all," Marcus replied, though he was acutely conscious of his modest surroundings as he invited them in. "Please, come in." Theodore Whitfield, worth billions, took in the small apartment with its second-hand furniture and faded carpet without a trace of judgment on his weathered face. Emma immediately noticed the framed photo of a beautiful woman on the mantel and the child's artwork covering the refrigerator. "Daddy, who's here?" Lily appeared from the kitchen, her dark hair in pigtails, her school clothes slightly wrinkled. "Lily, this is Emma and her grandfather, Mr. Whitfield," Marcus said gently. "Emma was on the school bus I helped with yesterday." Lily's eyes widened as she took in their visitors. She'd never seen clothes that expensive up close, but she focused on Emma with the direct curiosity of childhood. "Did you get hurt?" Lily asked Emma with concern. "A little," Emma admitted, "but your daddy made sure I was okay." Theodore watched this exchange with growing interest. The Chen family's apartment was clean, but clearly showed the signs of financial struggle. Yet there was something warm here, something genuine that his money couldn't buy. The way Marcus spoke to his daughter, the easy affection between them, the sense of being in a real home rather than a showcase. "Mr. Chen," Theodore began, "I came to thank you for saving my granddaughter's life, and to ask if there's anything I can do to show my gratitude." Marcus shook his head immediately. "That's not necessary, sir. I did what anyone would have done." "But that's where you're wrong," Theodore said quietly. "Most people would have waited for the professionals. You risked your life to save children you'd never met. That's not something anyone would do. That's something special people do." Emma had wandered over to look at Lily's homework spread across the kitchen table. Math worksheets, reading assignments, a science project about the solar system. It looked wonderfully normal compared to her own private tutoring sessions. "Is this yours?" Emma asked Lily, pointing to a drawing of the planets. "Yeah, I'm doing a report on Mars," Lily said proudly. "Daddy's helping me build a model, but we have to use things from around the house because the craft supplies at the store cost too much." The innocent comment hit Theodore like a physical blow. He thought of Emma's playroom, filled with every educational toy money could buy, most of them barely touched. Here was a child making do with cardboard and imagination, and she seemed genuinely excited about it. "Mars is fascinating," Emma said to Lily. "Did you know it has the largest volcano in our solar system?" As the girls began chatting about planets, Theodore found himself in a conversation with Marcus that would change both their lives. "You're raising her alone?" Theodore asked quietly. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "My wife passed away 4 years ago. It's just been Lily and me since then." "That can't be easy." "It's not," Marcus admitted, "but she's worth every struggle. I want her to have opportunities I never had." Theodore studied the man across from him. Marcus Chen was roughly the same age as his own son had been when the plane went down. A father doing his best in impossible circumstances. working with his hands to build a future for his child. There was something about him that reminded Theodore of his younger self, back when he was repairing radios in a rented storefront and dreaming of bigger things. "What kind of opportunities?" Theodore asked. Marcus glanced toward the kitchen where Lily was explaining her Mars project to Emma with animated gestures. "College, first and foremost. She's smart, smarter than I ever was. She should be able to study whatever interests her, not worry about how to pay for it." Marcus paused. "I've been saving, but construction work doesn't pay enough to cover tuition at a good school. I'm hoping she'll qualify for scholarships." Theodore nodded thoughtfully. In Emma's world, college was a given, not a dream to save for. The contrast struck him deeply. "Mr. Chen, I'd like to make you an offer." Marcus looked up warily. In his experience, offers from rich people usually came with strings attached. "I'm expanding Whitfield Industries' construction division," Theodore continued. "I need someone to oversee our new affordable housing project. Someone who understands construction but also understands what it means to need affordable housing. The position comes with a significant salary increase and full benefits, including educational funding for dependents." Marcus stared at him, hardly believing what he was hearing. "Sir, I appreciate the thought, but I'm just a regular construction worker. I don't have management experience." "You have something more valuable," Theodore said firmly. "You have integrity. Yesterday you proved that you'll risk everything to do what's right. That's the kind of person I want representing my company." In the kitchen, Emma and Lily had moved on from Mars to discussing their favorite books. Emma was fascinated by Lily's extensive library. All paperback copies from the used bookstore, carefully chosen and obviously well-loved. "I have tons of books I never read," Emma told Lily quietly. "My grandfather buys them for me, but I usually prefer the ones I pick out myself." "Daddy takes me to the library every Saturday," Lily said. "It's like having a million books, except you have to give them back." Emma had never been to a public library. The idea seemed wonderfully democratic, everyone having access to the same books, regardless of how much money they had. As the evening progressed, Theodore found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation with Marcus. Here was a man who spoke honestly about his struggles without self-pity, who worked hard without complaint, who clearly adored his daughter and would do anything for her. It reminded Theodore of why he'd started his business in the first place, to build something meaningful, something that helped people. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Lily goodbye like they were old friends. "Can I come back and see your Mars project when it's finished?" Emma asked. "Sure," Lily replied enthusiastically. "Maybe you can help me paint the rocket ship." Theodore shook Marcus's hand, pressing a business card into his palm. "Think about my offer," he said. "Call me tomorrow if you're interested." After they left, Marcus sat at his kitchen table staring at the elegant business card. Theodore Whitfield, Chief Executive Officer, Whitfield Industries. A phone number that probably connected directly to the most powerful man in the state. "Daddy, I like Emma," Lily announced as she got ready for bed. "She's really nice, and she knows a lot about planets." "I like her too, sweetheart. And her grandfather seems nice too, even though he's really rich." Marcus smiled at his daughter's matter-of-fact assessment. "How do you know he's really rich?" "His watch costs more than our car," Lily said practically. "But he was nice to us anyway." That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Theodore Whitfield's offer. A management position, better pay, benefits that would secure Lily's future. It seemed too good to be true, which in his experience usually meant it was. But as he replayed the conversation, he remembered the way Theodore had looked at Emma and Lily chatting in the kitchen. There had been something wistful in the older man's expression, as if he was seeing something he missed in his own life. Maybe this wasn't about charity or guilt. Maybe Theodore Whitfield was as lonely in his mansion as Marcus sometimes felt in his small apartment. Maybe they could help each other in ways that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the families they were trying to protect. The next morning, Marcus called the number on the card. The Whitfield Industries headquarters occupied an entire city block, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of corporate power. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside, adjusting his tie for the third time and trying to calm his racing heart. The suit he wore was his only one, purchased years ago for Sarah's funeral and rarely worn since. It felt foreign against his skin, a costume that didn't quite fit the man underneath. The lobby was a monument to success, marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, abstract sculptures that probably cost more than Marcus made in a decade, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. The receptionist, a polished woman with a practiced smile, directed him to the executive elevator with the kind of deference reserved for important visitors. Marcus had never been important before. Theodore's office occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Marcus could see his construction site from up here, a cluster of cranes and concrete that looked like a child's toys from this height. The contrast wasn't lost on him. Marcus, great. Theodore rose from behind a desk the size of Marcus's kitchen table, extending his hand warmly. "Thank you for coming." The older man looked different in his natural environment. Here, surrounded by the trappings of power, Theodore Whitfield commanded attention in a way that hadn't been apparent in Marcus's modest apartment. Yet his handshake was firm, but not dominating, his smile genuine rather than corporate. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Theodore said, gesturing toward a seating area with leather chairs that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. "And I'd like to discuss the position in more detail." For the next hour, Theodore outlined his vision for the affordable housing project. Whitfield Industries had acquired several parcels of land in neighborhoods that desperately needed quality housing options. The goal wasn't maximum profit, but sustainable development that would benefit the community long-term. "I need someone who understands what it means to worry about rent," Theodore explained. "Someone who knows the difference between a house and a home. You've lived that experience." Marcus listened carefully, asking questions about timelines, budgets, and worker safety protocols. His years on construction sites had taught him to spot potential problems, and he found himself genuinely excited about the project's possibilities. "Why me?" Marcus finally asked. "You could hire someone with an MBA, someone who speaks your language." Theodore was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the window. "Emma talks about your daughter constantly," he said eventually. "About how proud Lily is of her Mars project, how excited she gets about books from the library. Emma has every advantage money can provide, but she's never experienced that kind of pure enthusiasm about learning." Theodore turned back to Marcus, his expression serious. "I built this company to create something lasting, something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why that matters. Watching Emma with Lily reminded me. They see possibilities where I see problems, joy where I see complications." Marcus understood. He'd seen the same thing in Theodore's eyes that night in his apartment, the look of a man who'd gained everything he thought he wanted but lost something essential in the process. "I'll take the position," Marcus said. "But I have one condition." Theodore raised an eyebrow, clearly not accustomed to conditions from potential employees. "I want to stay involved in the actual construction. I don't just want to manage from an office. I want to work alongside the crew, make sure we're building something I'd be proud to live in myself." Theodore smiled, the first completely unguarded expression Marcus had seen from him. "I wouldn't expect anything else." The transition from construction worker to project manager wasn't easy. Marcus's new office felt too clean, too quiet after years of working under the open sky with machinery roaring around him. His first week was spent reviewing blueprints, meeting with architects, and learning software programs that made his head spin. But Theodore had been right about one thing. Marcus understood the project in ways that someone with purely academic credentials might not. When the architect proposed smaller closets to fit more units per building, Marcus pushed back, knowing how precious storage space was when you owned few possessions. When the contractor suggested cheaper insulation to stay under budget, Marcus insisted on quality materials, remembering too many winter nights when his apartment's thin walls couldn't keep out the cold. Emma had started visiting the construction site after school, ostensibly to see Lily but clearly fascinated by the process of creating something from nothing. Theodore would arrive to pick her up and find her in animated conversation with the workers, asking detailed questions about foundation pouring and electrical systems. "She's never shown this kind of interest in any of my business ventures before," Theodore confided to Marcus one afternoon as they watched Emma and Lily examine the architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. "Maybe because she can see how it helps people," Marcus suggested. "Kids understand fairness in ways adults sometimes forget." The two girls had become inseparable friends despite the difference in their circumstances. Emma would arrive at the site in a chauffeured car, but within minutes she'd be covered in dust, helping Lily collect interesting rocks, or listening to stories about the families who would eventually live in the houses they were building. Lily, for her part, seemed completely unimpressed by Emma's wealth. To her, Emma was simply a friend who knew about planets and loved books, and didn't mind getting dirty. The innocence of their friendship was something both Marcus and Theodore treasured, a reminder of what relationships could be when they weren't complicated by expectations or obligations. Marcus's new salary meant real changes for his small family. They moved to a better apartment, one with reliable heat and windows that closed properly. Lily got new clothes that didn't come from thrift stores, and Marcus could finally afford to take her out for dinner occasionally without calculating the cost of each item on the menu. But the biggest change was less tangible. For the first time in years, Marcus felt hopeful about the future. The affordable housing project was progressing ahead of schedule, his team respected his leadership style, and Lily was thriving with the security that came from not worrying about money. Theodore had become more than an employer. Their weekly progress meetings had evolved into genuine conversations about fatherhood, loss, and the responsibility that came with success. Marcus learned that Theodore's tough exterior masked a man still grieving the son and daughter-in-law he'd lost, still struggling to raise a granddaughter in a world that seemed designed to isolate people with money. "I used to think wealth would solve every problem," Theodore admitted one evening as they walked through the partially completed first building. "But it creates new ones. Emma has everything she could want materially, but she's lonely in ways I don't know how to fix." Marcus nodded, understanding more than Theodore might realize. Lily was lonely too after Sarah died. Not because we didn't have money, but because she felt different from other kids. Having a parent who's always working, always worried about bills, it makes you grow up too fast. "How did you help her?" "I tried to remember that being her father was more important than being her provider," Marcus said thoughtfully. "The money matters, but not as much as being present." Theodore absorbed this advice with the same attention he gave to quarterly reports and market analyses. He'd built an empire by paying attention to details, but he was learning that some of the most important details had nothing to do with business. The friendship between Emma and Lily was teaching both men lessons about connection. Emma would spend hours at Lily's new apartment, marveling at the cozy spaces and lived-in comfort that her mansion lacked despite its grandeur. Lily, meanwhile, was fascinated by Emma's stories of travel and private museums, but she was more interested in Emma herself than in the privileges that surrounded her. "Emma's really smart," Lily told her father one night as he tucked her into bed. "But she doesn't know about normal things like grocery shopping or riding city buses. I taught her how to use the washing machine today." Marcus smiled at the image of Theodore Whitfield's granddaughter learning domestic skills in their modest apartment. "What did she think about that?" "She said it was better than having someone else do everything for you because then you know it's done right," Lily reported. "I think she gets lonely in that big house with just her grandfather and all those people who work for them." The insight struck Marcus as both wise and heartbreaking. Emma had every material advantage, but lacked the simple pleasure of doing things for herself, of earning satisfaction through her own efforts. As autumn deepened, the affordable housing project began to take visible shape. The first building was nearly complete, its windows installed, its exterior walls painted in warm, welcoming colors that Marcus had chosen carefully. Potential residents had been interviewed, families selected based on need rather than ability to pay premium prices. Marcus found himself working longer hours, not because he had to, but because he genuinely loved what he was doing. This wasn't just construction, it was community building. Each apartment represented a family's chance for stability, a child's opportunity to have their own bedroom, a parent's relief at finding quality housing they could afford. Theodore often joined him on site, trading his expensive suits for jeans and work boots, learning to see his investment through Marcus's eyes. The older man had initially viewed the project as a calculated business decision, a way to demonstrate corporate responsibility while generating modest returns. But watching the buildings take shape, meeting the families who would live there had changed his perspective. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to build something that mattered." Theodore confided to Marcus one afternoon as they stood in what would soon be a family's kitchen. "Most of my projects now are about maximizing shareholder value or expanding market share. This feels different." "It is different," Marcus agreed. These families aren't customers or profit centers. They're people who need what we're creating. The comment sparked a longer conversation about business philosophy and social responsibility. Theodore had always viewed his charitable giving as separate from his business operations, a way to give back after extracting maximum profit. Marcus's approach was more integrated, seeing ethical business practices as inseparable from long-term success. "You're changing how I think about everything," Theodore admitted. "Emma notices it too. She says I'm more like the grandfather she remembers from when she was little." Marcus understood the compliment. In their weeks of working together, he'd seen glimpses of the man Theodore must have been before tragedy and responsibility hardened him into the corporate titan the world knew. There was warmth there, humor, a genuine desire to make a difference that had been buried under years of boardroom politics and financial pressures. Emma's influence on both men was becoming increasingly apparent. Her friendship with Lily had reminded Theodore of the importance of genuine connection, while her questions about the housing project had challenged both men to think beyond mere construction to community building. The 12-year-old had started a notebook where she recorded stories about the families who would live in the apartments. She interviewed the construction workers about their own families, created drawings of what she imagined each apartment would look like when families moved in, and peppered Marcus with questions about building codes and safety regulations. "She's going to make a good architect someday," Marcus told Theodore one evening as they reviewed the week's progress. "Or urban planner. She understands that buildings aren't just structures, they're where people live their lives." Theodore beamed with pride, but there was something else in his expression, a thoughtfulness that Marcus had learned to recognize. "I've been thinking about something," Theodore said slowly. "Emma's education has been very traditional. Private schools, private tutors, all focused on preparing her to eventually take over the company. But watching her here, seeing how engaged she gets with real-world problems, I wonder if she might benefit from a different approach." Marcus waited, sensing there was more to this thought. "What would you think about Emma attending public school with Lily?" The question caught Marcus completely off guard. Theodore Whitfield's granddaughter, heiress to a billion-dollar empire, attending the same public school as Lily Chen, daughter of a construction worker turned project manager. "Are you serious?" Marcus asked. "Completely. Emma's been homeschooled since the accident, mostly for security reasons. But she's missing out on the kind of experiences that shaped you and me. The experience of working with people from different backgrounds, of earning respect through character rather than inheritance." Marcus considered the implications. Emma would face challenges in public school that she'd never encountered in her protected environment. But she'd also have opportunities for growth that money couldn't buy. "It would be a big adjustment for her," Marcus said carefully. "But you think it's a good idea?" Marcus thought about the two girls, bent over homework together at his kitchen table, Emma helping Lily with advanced math, while Lily explained the social dynamics of elementary school friendship. They balanced each other in ways that seemed natural and beneficial. "I think Emma's stronger than you give her credit for," Marcus said finally. "And I think she's hungry for normal experiences. If you're willing to let her try it, Lily would love having her friend at school." Theodore nodded slowly, his decision made. "I'll need to arrange security, but discreet security. She should be able to be just another student." The conversation marked another shift in their relationship. Theodore was trusting Marcus not just with a construction project, but with advice about raising his granddaughter. The weight of that trust wasn't lost on Marcus, who remembered his own father's struggles to provide both guidance and opportunity for his son. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that transformed the construction site into a wonderland that delighted both girls. Emma and Lily would build snowmen between the framed houses, their laughter echoing off the walls that would soon shelter families seeking fresh starts. Marcus began each day by walking through the site, checking progress and safety protocols, but also simply appreciating what they were creating together. The first families would move in after the new year, and Marcus felt a pride deeper than anything he'd experienced in his years of building luxury condominiums for people who already had everything they needed. Theodore had started joining these morning walks, the two men developing a routine of discussing the day's priorities while watching their daughters play in the snow. The conversations ranged from construction schedules to parenting challenges, from business philosophy to personal dreams. Emma's never had a friend like Lily, Theodore observed one morning as they watched the girls engaged in an elaborate snow fort construction project. Someone who likes her for who she is rather than what she represents. Lily's never had a friend who challenges her to think bigger either, Marcus replied. Emma asks questions that push Lily to explain things more clearly, to defend her ideas. Both men understood they were watching something precious, a friendship unburdened by the complications that would inevitably intrude as the girls grew older and became more aware of the differences in their circumstances. As December deepened, Marcus found himself facing an unexpected challenge. The housing project was exceeding all expectations, drawing attention from city officials, housing advocates, and media outlets interested in successful affordable housing initiatives. Theodore wanted to showcase their work, to demonstrate that profitable businesses could also serve social good. But the attention made Marcus uncomfortable. He'd never sought recognition for his work, preferring the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The idea of press conferences and award ceremonies felt foreign to his nature. "You built this," Theodore reminded him during one of their morning walks. "People should know that good housing comes from people who understand what good housing means." Marcus appreciated the sentiment, but he worried about what increased visibility might mean for his family's privacy. Lily was thriving in their new normal, secure and happy in ways she hadn't been since Sarah's death. He didn't want media attention to disrupt that stability. Emma, however, had different concerns. As their friendship deepened, she'd become protective of Lily in ways that surprised the adults around them. When a local newspaper wanted to photograph the success story of the housing project, Emma immediately objected. "They'll make it sound like Lily's family needed to be rescued," she told her grandfather firmly. "That's not what happened. Marcus saved me, remember? And he built these houses because he's good at building things, not because anyone felt sorry for him." Theodore was struck by his granddaughter's fierce loyalty and mature understanding of media narratives. Emma might have been raised in privilege, but she understood dignity and respect in ways that impressed him. The solution they developed satisfied everyone. Instead of focusing on individual stories, the media coverage would highlight the project's innovative approach to affordable housing, its attention to community building rather than mere construction, and its potential as a model for other developments. Marcus found himself reluctantly agreeing to brief interviews, always emphasizing the team effort required for the project's success. He deflected personal questions, redirecting attention to the families who would benefit from quality housing and the skilled workers who'd made the vision reality. As Christmas approached, both families began planning celebrations that reflected their changed circumstances. Marcus could afford gifts for Lily that went beyond necessities, while Theodore found himself looking forward to a holiday that would feel more like a family gathering than a corporate obligation. Emma had requested only one gift that year, the chance to spend Christmas Eve with Lily's family in their apartment rather than in the mansion's formal dining room. Theodore initially hesitated, worrying about security and protocol, but Marcus's invitation was so genuine and Emma's desire so heartfelt that he found himself agreeing. The Christmas Eve dinner that brought their families together would later be remembered by all of them as a turning point, the evening when they stopped being a wealthy employer and his grateful employee and became something more complex and meaningful. But as December 24th approached, none of them could predict how a simple holiday dinner would set in motion events that would test everything they'd built together, revealing truths about loyalty, identity, and the price of belonging to different worlds. The affordable housing project's success had created ripple effects throughout the city's development community. Other builders were studying Marcus's methods. City planners were recommending similar approaches for future projects, and Theodore's board of directors was pushing for expansion of the affordable housing division. Marcus found himself in meetings with people who spoke in acronyms and thought in profit margins, trying to explain that successful community development couldn't be reduced to a simple formula. Each neighborhood had different needs, different challenges, different assets to build upon. "You can't just copy what we did here and paste it somewhere else," Marcus explained to a roomful of executives who looked skeptical about taking advice from someone who'd been hanging drywall 6 months earlier. Community development is about understanding the community first. Theodore watched these interactions with growing appreciation for Marcus's instincts and growing frustration with his own board's narrow focus on replicating success without understanding its foundations. After one particularly difficult meeting where board members suggested scaling up by hiring more Marcus types to manage similar projects, Theodore found himself reconsidering the entire corporate structure that had made him wealthy, but was now limiting his ability to do meaningful work. "They think you're replaceable," Theodore told Marcus as they walked through the nearly completed second building. They think what you do is a skill set that can be taught, rather than a perspective that comes from experience. Marcus wasn't surprised by the board's attitude. He'd encountered similar thinking throughout his career, the assumption that manual labor was somehow less valuable than abstract knowledge, that understanding gained through necessity was inferior to education gained through privilege. Maybe they're right, Marcus said with a slight smile. Maybe what I bring to this work can be taught. But it would have to be taught to people who want to learn it, not people who think they already know everything. The comment sparked Theodore's imagination. What if they created a different kind of development company? One that prioritized community impact over maximum profit. One that trained managers through hands-on experience, rather than just classroom theory. The idea was revolutionary within the context of Whitfield Industries' traditional business model, but it aligned perfectly with the vision that had originally motivated Theodore to build his company. He began developing plans for a separate division, one that would operate with different metrics for success and different approaches to leadership development. Emma and Lily, meanwhile, were navigating their own changes. Emma had officially enrolled in public school for the spring semester, a decision that had required extensive security planning and careful consideration of how to integrate a billionaire's granddaughter into a normal classroom environment. The girls spent winter break preparing Emma for the transition, with Lily serving as cultural translator for everything from cafeteria etiquette to playground politics. Emma approached these lessons with the same intensity she brought to her academic studies, determined to succeed in this new environment. The most important thing, Lily explained during one of their preparation sessions, is to be yourself. But also, don't mention how much money your family has. Some kids get weird about that. Emma nodded seriously, understanding that her greatest challenge wouldn't be academic but social. She'd never had to navigate peer relationships without the protective buffer of carefully selected classmates and supervised interactions. Marcus watched his daughter coaching Emma with a mixture of pride and concern. Lily was wise beyond her years, but she was still only 8 years old. The responsibility of helping Emma adjust to public school seemed like a heavy burden for someone so young. "Are you sure you're okay with Emma starting at your school?" Marcus asked Lily one evening as they worked on her homework together. "It might change how some kids treat you, knowing you're friends with someone from such a wealthy family." Lily considered this seriously, her pencil paused over her math worksheet. "Some kids might be mean about it," she agreed. "But Emma's my friend because she's nice to me and we like the same things. If other kids don't understand that, it's their problem, not mine." The mature response reminded Marcus of Sarah, who'd had the same straightforward approach to relationships and the same loyalty to people she cared about. He felt a surge of pride in the young woman Lily was becoming, shaped by hardship, but not hardened by it. As January approached, both families were preparing for changes that would test the bonds they'd built. Emma's entry into public school would expose their friendship to scrutiny from peers and parents who might have opinions about the appropriateness of relationships across such vast economic differences. The affordable housing project's success was attracting national attention, bringing opportunities for Marcus and Theodore, but also pressures to expand faster than felt comfortable or sustainable. Media interest was intensifying, with reporters seeking the human interest stories behind the development's success. Theodore found himself caught between his desire to protect his family's privacy and his recognition that their story might inspire other communities and developers to pursue similar projects. The attention could benefit the broader affordable housing movement, but it could also disrupt the normal life Emma craved and the stability Marcus had worked so hard to provide for Lily. The decision about how much public exposure to accept would ultimately rest with Marcus, since his family's story was the one reporters found most compelling. But Theodore knew that whatever choice Marcus made would affect Emma's ability to integrate into public school and their family's ability to maintain the authentic relationships they'd built. As winter deepened, the two men found themselves discussing not just construction schedules and business strategies, but the complex relationship between privacy and influence, between personal happiness and public service. These conversations would shape decisions that would define not just their professional partnership, but the future of their families' intertwined lives. Neither Marcus nor Theodore could predict how the choices they made in the coming weeks would test every assumption they'd developed about friendship, loyalty, and what it meant to build something lasting in a world that often valued image over substance. The success they'd created together was about to face its greatest challenge, not from external obstacles, but from the internal tensions that arise when private relationships become public curiosities, and when the very achievements that brought families together threaten to drive them apart. The call came on a Tuesday morning in February, just as Marcus was reviewing the blueprints for the third affordable housing building. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely unfamiliar. "Mr. Chen, this is Victoria Sterling from Channel 7 News. We're working on a feature story about successful affordable housing initiatives, and your name keeps coming up. We'd love to set up an interview." Marcus politely declined, as he had with the dozen other reporters who'd called in recent weeks. But Victoria Sterling was persistent. "We understand you prefer to stay out of the spotlight, but we have information that suggests your story is more compelling than you're letting on. Information about your relationship with Theodore Whitfield that goes beyond a simple business arrangement." Something in her tone made Marcus's stomach clench. "What kind of information?" "I think it would be better if we discussed this in person. Are you available this afternoon?" Against his better judgment, Marcus agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near the construction site. Victoria Sterling turned out to be younger than her phone voice had suggested, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the modest neighborhood cafe. "Mr. Chen, thank you for meeting with me," she began, spreading several photographs across the small table between them. These were taken over the past few months. Marcus stared at the images with growing unease. There was Emma arriving at the construction site in her grandfather's limousine. Theodore and Marcus walking through the housing project, deep in conversation. The two families leaving a restaurant together, Emma and Lily laughing as they shared a dessert. "These look like surveillance photos," Marcus said carefully. "They're public photographs taken in public places," Victoria replied smoothly. "But they raise interesting questions about the nature of your relationship with one of the city's most powerful families." Marcus felt the familiar weight of being judged, measured, found somehow wanting. "Theodore Whitfield offered me a job. I accepted. That's the extent of our relationship." Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Really?" "Because our sources suggest that Theodore Whitfield's granddaughter spends considerable time at your apartment. That you and your daughter are frequently guests at social events in circles far above your usual station. Some people might wonder what services you're providing that warrant such unusual access." The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Victoria interrupted. "I'm simply reporting on an unusual friendship between a construction worker and a billionaire. But in my experience, when wealthy men develop sudden friendships with working-class families, especially single fathers with young daughters, there are often complications that both parties prefer to keep private." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This conversation is over. Mr. Chen, I'm giving you an opportunity to tell your side of the story before we air our segment. Don't you think your daughter deserves to have her father's reputation protected?" The threat was clear, and it terrified Marcus more than any physical danger ever had. Lily was finally happy, secure, thriving in ways she never had before. The thought of her classmates, teachers, neighbors hearing twisted implications about her father's character made him physically ill. "What do you want?" he asked quietly, sitting back down. "An exclusive interview. Full access to document the housing project, your working relationship with Theodore Whitfield, and the touching friendship between your daughter and Emma Whitfield. A feel-good story about crossing class boundaries." Marcus understood. They wanted to turn his family's life into entertainment, to package their genuine relationships as heartwarming content for people who would watch and forget by the next news cycle. "And if I refuse? Then we run the story we have. Mysterious connection between billionaire and construction worker raises questions. Let the audience draw their own conclusions." Marcus stared at the photographs scattered across the table, seeing his life through the lens of strangers who would judge without understanding, who would reduce complex relationships to simple narratives of exploitation or opportunism. "I need to think about it," he said finally. 24 hours, Mr. Chen. After that, we're moving forward either way." That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment trying to process the conversation while Lily worked on her homework at the kitchen table. She'd been excited all day about Emma's first week at public school, chattering about how well Emma was fitting in despite her initial nervousness. "Emma said some kids asked her weird questions about where she lives," Lily reported, looking up from her math worksheet. But she just told them she lives with her grandfather and changed the subject. She's really good at not making a big deal about stuff. Marcus managed a smile, but his heart was heavy. How long before those weird questions became accusations? How long before Lily found herself defending their friendship against people who saw only the surface differences between their families? The phone rang as Marcus was tucking Lily into bed. Theodore's voice was tense, unusual for a man who typically maintained careful control over his emotions. "Marcus, we need to talk. Something's happened." They met at Theodore's office an hour later. The building was empty except for security guards, the executive floors eerily quiet without the usual bustle of business activity. Theodore looked older than Marcus had ever seen him, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "I received a call from Victoria Sterling today," Theodore began without preamble. "She's planning to run a story about our families." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. At least they were facing this together. "She showed me photographs," Marcus said. "Made some pretty ugly implications about why you'd befriend someone like me." Theodore's expression hardened. "What kind of implications?" Marcus hesitated, then repeated the conversation as accurately as he could remember. With each detail, Theodore's face grew darker, his hands clenching into fists on the polished surface of his desk. "She's threatening to destroy your reputation to force cooperation," Theodore said when Marcus finished. "That's extortion." "Maybe, but fighting her would mean more publicity, more attention. And in the end, people believe what they want to believe anyway." Theodore was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the city lights below. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that Marcus had never heard before. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned months ago, but I was afraid it would change how you saw our friendship." Marcus waited, sensing that whatever Theodore was about to reveal would alter everything between them. "When I first investigated you after the bus accident, I didn't stop at basic background information. I had my security team conduct a comprehensive review of your life, your finances, your late wife's medical records, your daughter's school performance, even your mother's immigration history." The words hit Marcus like cold water. "You investigated me?" "I told myself it was about protecting Emma, ensuring that the man who saved her life was trustworthy. But the truth is, I was looking for leverage. I'm a businessman, Marcus. I'm accustomed to understanding people's motivations, their pressure points, what they need or want badly enough to compromise their principles." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him, everything he'd believed about their relationship suddenly questionable. "What did you find?" he asked quietly. Theodore met his eyes directly. A man who worked 3 jobs to pay for his wife's medical treatment, who sold everything he owned to keep her comfortable in her final months, who's been putting away $5 a week for 8 years trying to save for his daughter's college education. A man who's never missed a rent payment, never failed to show up for work, never asked for help even when he desperately needed it. Marcus waited for the other shoe to drop, for the revelation of some weakness Theodore had discovered and planned to exploit. "I found a man with nothing I could use against him, because there was nothing to use. No secret debts, no hidden vices, no compromising associations. Just integrity, so complete it made me ashamed of looking for ways to manipulate you." The confession hung between them like a challenge, forcing both men to confront the foundation their friendship had been built on. "When you offered me the job," Marcus said slowly, "was it because you genuinely believed I could do it, or because your investigation told you I was controllable?" Theodore was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Both. I knew you'd be good at the work because you understood it in ways my usual executives never could. But I also knew you wouldn't refuse because you needed what I was offering too much to walk away." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest, a familiar sensation from the years before he'd known Theodore, when he'd learned not to trust situations that seemed too good to be true. "So this has all been what, an experiment? A way to see if you could transform a poor man's life and feel good about yourself?" "No." Theodore's response was immediate and fierce. "Marcus, whatever my original motivations were, our friendship became real. Watching you work, seeing how you raise Lily, learning from your perspective on everything from business ethics to parenting, it changed me in ways I never expected." Marcus wanted to believe him, but the revelation of the investigation had poisoned something essential to trust. How could he know what was genuine and what was calculated manipulation? "Emma," Marcus said suddenly, Does she know about the investigation? Theodore shook his head. Emma knows nothing about any of this. Her friendship with Lily is completely genuine, as is her affection for you. At least that was something. Whatever complicated motivations had driven Theodore's initial interest in Marcus's family, the children's relationship had developed naturally, without the contamination of adult agendas and power dynamics. What do we do about Victoria Sterling? Marcus asked, focusing on the immediate crisis rather than the larger questions about trust and manipulation that would take much longer to resolve. We could fight her, Theodore suggested. My legal team could make her life very difficult. Media companies don't like expensive lawsuits, especially when their reporting methods are questionable. Marcus considered this option, but he knew the cost would extend far beyond legal fees. Fighting would mean more attention, not less, and it would confirm that there's something to hide, even if there isn't. Theodore nodded reluctantly. The alternative is to give her what she wants. Let her tell our story. Try to maintain some control over the narrative. Your story, Marcus corrected. This affects your family's reputation. Your business interests. I'm just the supporting character in whatever drama she's creating. You're not a supporting character to me, Theodore said quietly. And you're not one to Emma. Whatever mistakes I made in the beginning, whatever calculations drove my initial interest in your family, you've become one of the most important people in our lives. Marcus appreciated the sentiment, but trust, once damaged, couldn't be repaired with words alone. The knowledge that Theodore had investigated him, had approached their friendship as a business opportunity to be managed, colored every interaction they'd shared. I need to think about this, Marcus said, standing to leave. About all of this. Theodore watched him go with the expression of a man who just lost something valuable through his own actions, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to offer reassurance. Some betrayals, even those committed with good intentions, required time to heal. The next morning brought a new complication. Marcus arrived at the construction site to find Emma sitting on a stack of lumber, her school backpack beside her, tears streaming down her face. Emma? What are you doing here? Why aren't you in school? She looked up at him with eyes that reminded him painfully of Theodore's, green and intelligent, but currently filled with hurt and confusion. I heard grandfather on the phone last night, she said quietly. He was talking to someone about you, about our families being in the news. He sounded worried. Marcus sat down beside her, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes when people become friends across different backgrounds, other people get curious about it. That's not necessarily bad, but it can be complicated. Emma was quiet for a moment, picking at the threads of her expensive school uniform. Are you going to stop being friends with us? She asked finally. The question broke Marcus's heart. Whatever complicated motivations had driven Theodore's initial interest in his family, Emma's attachment was purely innocent. She'd found in Lily the first real friendship of her protected life, and in Marcus a parental figure who saw her as a person rather than an heiress. Emma, whatever happens between your grandfather and me, it won't change how I feel about you. You're important to Lily, which makes you important to me. She nodded, but tears continued to fall. Lily's the only friend I've ever had who likes me for me. At my old school, everyone knew who my grandfather was, so they were either scared of me or they wanted something from me. But Lily just likes me. Marcus understood the depth of her fear. Losing Lily's friendship would mean returning to the isolation she'd known before, surrounded by people who saw her inheritance before they saw her. Lily's not going anywhere, Marcus assured her. No matter what anyone writes in newspapers or says on television, she's your friend because of who you are, not because of your circumstances. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, looking more composed but still fragile. Can I call in sick to school today and help you work on the houses? Marcus knew he should insist she return to school, maintain the normalcy she'd worked so hard to achieve. But he also understood her need to be somewhere safe while her world felt uncertain. Okay, but just for today. And we need to call your grandfather so he doesn't worry. Theodore arrived at the site within an hour, his relief at finding Emma safe quickly replaced by concern about why she'd felt the need to flee school. The conversation between grandfather and granddaughter took place in the construction trailer, their voices rising occasionally but remaining largely private. When they emerged, Theodore looked tired but resolved. "Emma wants to know the truth about Victoria Sterling's story," he told Marcus. "I think she deserves to understand what's happening, even if it's complicated." Over the next hour, they explained the situation to Emma in terms she could understand, focusing on the media's interest in their friendship rather than the more troubling implications Victoria Sterling had suggested. Emma listened with the serious attention she brought to all important matters, asking thoughtful questions and making observations that surprised both men. "So she wants to make our friendship into entertainment," Emma summarized when they finished. "Like we're characters in a story instead of real people." "That's one way to look at it," Marcus agreed. Emma was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing the information. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a determination that reminded Marcus of her grandfather. "I think we should do the interview." Both men started to object, but Emma held up her hand with an authority that belied her 12 years. "If we hide, people will make up their own stories about us, and those stories might be worse than the truth. But if we tell our story ourselves, we can make sure people understand that friendship doesn't always follow rules about money or social class." Marcus was struck by her maturity, her instinctive understanding of media dynamics that many adults struggled to grasp, but he also worried about exposing a child to the kind of scrutiny that could follow. "Emma, once your story is public, you can't take it back. People will always know who you are, and some of them will treat you differently because of it." She nodded thoughtfully. "They treat me differently already because of grandfather's money. At least this way they'll know I have friends who like me for myself." Theodore looked at his granddaughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this, Emma? We can find other ways to handle the situation." "I'm sure," Emma said firmly. "But I have one condition. I want Lily to be part of the interview too. If they're going to tell the story of our friendship, they should talk to both of us." The idea of involving Lily in a television interview terrified Marcus. His daughter had never sought attention, had never had to defend her choices or explain her relationships to strangers. But when he picked Lily up from school that afternoon and explained the situation, her response surprised him. "If Emma wants to do the interview, then I'll do it too," Lily said matter-of-factly. "We're friends, so we should stick together." The simple loyalty in her voice reminded Marcus why Theodore had been drawn to their family in the first place. There was something pure about Lily's approach to relationships, something uncomplicated by the calculations and fears that governed most adult interactions. That evening, Marcus called Victoria Sterling to accept her interview offer, but with conditions. The children would participate only if questions were pre-approved, if the interview took place in a neutral location, and if both families had the opportunity to review the story before it aired. Victoria agreed to most of his terms, though she insisted on final editorial control over the broadcast version. It was the best arrangement Marcus could negotiate, and it gave him some comfort that they would at least have the opportunity to tell their story in their own words. The interview was scheduled for the following Saturday at the community center near the affordable housing project. The setting was deliberately chosen to emphasize the practical outcomes of their partnership rather than focusing solely on the personal relationship between the families. As the day approached, Marcus found himself alternating between confidence and dread. He believed their story was worth telling, that their friendship demonstrated something positive about human nature's capacity to transcend artificial barriers. But he also knew that public attention could be unpredictable, that even positive stories could have unintended consequences. Theodore seemed equally conflicted. He'd spent his career managing his public image, carefully controlling information about his personal life and business dealings. The idea of allowing cameras into his relationship with Emma, of exposing his own emotional vulnerabilities to public scrutiny, went against every instinct he'd developed as a high-profile businessman. But Emma's determination proved contagious. She spent the week before the interview preparing thoughtfully, writing notes about what she wanted people to understand about friendship and kindness. Her seriousness about the opportunity impressed both men and reminded them that they were participating not just to protect their own reputations, but to give voice to a child who had something important to say. The morning of the interview dawned clear and cold, with late winter sunlight streaming through the windows of the community center. Victoria Sterling arrived with a full camera crew, transforming the familiar space into a television studio with lights, microphones, and equipment that made everyone nervous except Emma, who seemed energized by the activity. The interview began with basic questions about the housing project, allowing Marcus to explain his vision for affordable housing that prioritized community building over profit maximization. Theodore discussed his company's commitment to social responsibility, emphasizing the business case for ethical development practices. But it was clear that Victoria Sterling's real interest lay in the personal story behind their professional partnership. She guided the conversation toward the bus accident, the initial meeting between the families, and the friendship that had developed between Emma and Lily. "Emma," Victoria said, turning to address the 12-year-old directly, "you come from a very wealthy family, while Lily's family has faced financial struggles. Some people might wonder how you could have so much in common." Emma looked directly into the camera with the poise of someone much older. "People think money is the most important thing about a person. But it's not. Lily and I both love reading and space exploration and building things. We both lost parents when we were young. We both sometimes feel different from other kids. Those things matter more than how much money our families have." Lily nodded in agreement. "Emma's really smart and nice, and she helps me with my homework. I help her understand how to be a regular kid. We help each other." Victoria Sterling asked follow-up questions about their friendship, about how their families had grown closer, about what they'd learned from each other. The children's responses were natural and articulate, clearly conveying the genuine affection and mutual respect that characterized their relationship. When Victoria turned her attention back to the adults, her questions became more probing. "Theodore, some people might wonder why one of the country's wealthiest men would develop such a close relationship with a construction worker and his daughter. What do you say to those who suggest there might be ulterior motives involved?" Theodore straightened in his chair, his expression hardening slightly. "I'd say those people have forgotten that wealth doesn't insulate you from loneliness, or from recognizing character when you encounter it. Marcus Chen saved my granddaughter's life, and in getting to know him and his daughter, I remembered what I'd lost sight of in my focus on building a business empire. I remembered that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all." "And Marcus," Victoria continued, "how do you respond to suggestions that you've leveraged your heroic act to gain access to circles far above your usual social standing?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "I didn't save Emma because she was rich. I didn't even know who she was. I saved her because she was a child in danger, and any decent person would have done the same thing. As for social circles, I'm not interested in impressing anyone. I'm interested in raising my daughter to be a good person and doing work that makes a positive difference in people's lives." The interview continued for another hour, covering topics from the housing project's success to the children's plans for the future. Throughout the conversation, both families remained focused on substance over sensation, emphasizing the practical outcomes of their partnership rather than dwelling on the novelty of their friendship. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Victoria Sterling seemed satisfied with the material she'd gathered, though Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that her final story might emphasize different aspects of their conversation than he would have chosen. Emma and Lily, meanwhile, seemed energized by the experience, excited about the possibility that their story might inspire other unlikely friendships or demonstrate that differences in background didn't have to create barriers between people. As they packed up to leave, Theodore approached Marcus privately. "Whatever happens with this story, I want you to know that meeting your family changed my life in ways I'm still understanding. Emma is happier and more confident than she's been since her parents died, and I'm learning to be the kind of grandfather she deserves rather than just the guardian of her inheritance." Marcus appreciated the sentiment, but the revelation about Theodore's initial investigation still created distance between them that would take time to bridge. "I'm glad Emma's happy," he said carefully, "and I hope the interview helps people understand that friendship doesn't have to follow conventional rules." They left the community center that day with a mixture of hope and apprehension, knowing that their private relationships were about to become public property, subject to interpretation by strangers who would judge them based on edited clips and brief segments rather than the complex reality of their connections. The story aired the following Tuesday evening, introduced by Victoria Sterling as an exploration of an unlikely friendship that's changing how one of America's wealthiest men thinks about success and community responsibility. The broadcast was largely positive, focusing on the housing project's success and the genuine warmth between both families. Emma and Lily came across as articulate and thoughtful children whose friendship transcended their different backgrounds. Theodore was portrayed as a businessman learning to balance profit with purpose, while Marcus appeared as a dedicated father and skilled professional whose integrity had earned the respect of one of the city's most powerful figures. But the story also raised questions it didn't fully answer, leaving viewers to speculate about the deeper dynamics of the relationship between families from such different worlds. Comments on the news station's website ranged from admiring to skeptical, with some readers praising the family's openness while others questioned whether such friendships could be truly equal given the vast differences in wealth and influence. The broadcast's impact was immediate and far-reaching. Marcus received calls from developers in other cities interested in replicating his approach to affordable housing. Theodore found himself invited to speak at conferences about corporate social responsibility. Emma and Lily became minor celebrities at school, with classmates and teachers suddenly much more interested in their friendship. But the attention also brought challenges neither family had fully anticipated. Reporters began investigating other aspects of their lives, looking for additional angles to explore. Property values in the neighborhood around the housing project began to rise, potentially pricing out the very families the development was meant to serve. Emma found herself dealing with increased security measures and more restrictive rules about her activities. Most significantly, the broadcast had exposed their relationship to judgment from people who would never understand the genuine affection and mutual respect that had developed between their families. Some viewers saw Marcus as an opportunist who'd leveraged his heroism for personal gain. Others criticized Theodore for what they perceived as noblesse oblige, a wealthy man's attempt to feel better about his privilege by befriending the deserving poor. Neither interpretation captured the reality of their friendship, but both would follow them in ways that complicated their ability to maintain the natural, unforced connection they'd originally shared. 3 months after the broadcast aired, Marcus found himself facing a decision that would test everything he'd learned about integrity, ambition, and the price of belonging to different worlds. Theodore had offered him a promotion to Vice President of Community Development, a position that would oversee affordable housing projects across multiple states and carry a salary that would transform his family's circumstances permanently. The offer was genuine, based on Marcus's proven abilities and innovative approach to development. But it was also clearly influenced by the positive publicity their partnership had generated and the business opportunities that had emerged from their public profile. Accepting the position would mean financial security for Lily, opportunities for travel and education that Marcus had never imagined possible, and the chance to impact housing policy on a national level. But it would also mean deeper integration into Theodore's world, with all the complications that entailed. Emma and Lily had maintained their friendship despite the increased attention, but the dynamics had subtly shifted. Emma now attended private functions with her grandfather, where she was introduced as the girl from the inspiring news story. Lily found herself invited to exclusive events and private schools, opportunities that came with expectations about gratitude and appropriate behavior. Both children were handling these changes with remarkable maturity, but Marcus worried about the long-term impact of their friendship becoming a symbol, rather than simply a relationship between two girls who enjoyed each other's company. The afternoon Marcus planned to give Theodore his answer about the promotion, he received an unexpected visit from Emma. She arrived at the construction site after school, still wearing her uniform but with dirt on her shoes from walking through the housing project instead of waiting for her usual ride. "Marcus, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, Emma. What's on your mind?" She was quiet for a moment, watching workers install windows in the newest building. "Do you think Lily likes being my friend because of who I am, or because of what my family can do for her family?" The question broke Marcus's heart, revealing the insecurity that wealth and attention had created in a child who'd once been confident in her relationships. "Emma, Lily liked you before she knew anything about your family's money. She liked you when you were just a girl who knew about planets and asked good questions about construction. Nothing's changed about that." "But everything has changed," Emma said quietly. "People look at us differently now. They expect our friendship to mean something bigger than just two kids who like each other." Marcus sat down beside her on the stack of lumber where she'd cried months earlier, recognizing the weight of adult expectations settling on a 12-year-old's shoulders. "You're right that things have changed. But friendship isn't about what other people think or expect. It's about how you treat each other, how you make each other feel, what you share when no one else is watching. Emma nodded slowly. Lily still tells me about her dreams of being a doctor. She still helps me with math problems. She still laughs at my jokes, even the ones that aren't funny. Then your friendship is still real, no matter what anyone else says about it. They sat together in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the construction workers prepare to end their day. Finally, Emma spoke again. "Are you going to take the promotion grandfather offered you?" Marcus was surprised that she knew about it. "How did you hear about that?" "I heard you and grandfather talking about it last week. You seemed worried about something." Marcus considered how to explain his concerns to someone so young, then decided that Emma had already demonstrated remarkable insight into adult complexities. "I'm worried that accepting it might change the reasons I do this work. Right now, I build houses because families need them. If I take the promotion, I might start building houses because it makes good business sense or creates positive publicity." Emma was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking through the implications. "But if you don't take it, someone else will. And they might not care about families the way you do." The observation was characteristically astute, cutting through Marcus's concerns to identify the larger stakes involved. "That's true," Marcus admitted. "So maybe the question isn't whether taking the promotion will change you. Maybe the question is whether you can change the promotion." Marcus looked at the girl beside him with new respect. At 12 years old, Emma had articulated something he'd been struggling to understand about power and responsibility, about the difference between being corrupted by success and using success to create positive change. That evening, Marcus called Theodore to accept the promotion, but with conditions. He would oversee the national expansion of affordable housing initiatives, but each project would be required to meet community impact standards rather than just profit targets. Local hiring would be prioritized, with training programs for residents who wanted to learn construction skills. Community input would be incorporated into every design phase. Theodore agreed to all of his conditions, understanding that Marcus's approach to the work was exactly what made him valuable in the role. "You're going to change how this industry thinks about development," Theodore told him during their meeting to formalize the arrangement. "Not just what gets built, but why it gets built, and who benefits from the process." Marcus appreciated the confidence, but he was focused on more immediate concerns. "I want to make sure this doesn't change what matters most. Emma and Lily's friendship. Our families' ability to have genuine relationships despite all the attention we've received." Theodore nodded seriously. "That's what I want too. Emma's happier than she's been since her parents died. And I know that's largely because of her friendship with Lily and her relationship with your family." Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into his new role with the same intensity he'd brought to construction work. He traveled to cities across the country, meeting with local officials, community leaders, and families in need of affordable housing. Each project began with extensive community consultation, ensuring that developments would serve actual needs rather than abstract concepts about what poor families required. The work was challenging but fulfilling in ways Marcus had never experienced. He was no longer just building individual houses, but creating systems that could provide quality housing for thousands of families. The scale of the impact was transformative, both for the communities they served and for Marcus's understanding of his own capabilities. Emma and Lily continued their friendship, navigating the complexities of their changed circumstances with remarkable adaptability. Emma had become more confident in her public interactions, understanding that her family's wealth came with opportunities to help others rather than just privileges to enjoy. Lily had grown more articulate about her dreams and ambitions, inspired by Emma's example of using advantages constructively rather than simply accepting them passively. Both girls were thriving academically and socially, their friendship serving as an anchor point in lives that had become increasingly complex. They still spent weekend afternoons working on science projects and reading together, still shared secrets and inside jokes that had nothing to do with their families' public profiles. Theodore had also evolved in his approach to both business and parenting. Emma's happiness and confidence had taught him that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth, but about using resources to create meaningful connections and positive change. He'd begun restructuring other aspects of Whitfield Industries to prioritize long-term community benefit over short-term profit maximization. The changes weren't always popular with shareholders or board members who preferred traditional approaches to business development. But Theodore's public profile as a socially conscious CEO had actually enhanced the company's reputation and attracted investors interested in sustainable, ethical business practices. 1 year after the television interview that had made their story public, both families found themselves back at the community center where it had all been filmed. This time, they weren't there for media attention, but for the grand opening of the affordable housing project's final phase. The development now housed 43 families, with a community garden, a playground built by the residents themselves, and a small business incubator that had already launched 6 local enterprises. Marcus walked through the completed neighborhood with a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond personal achievement. These weren't just houses, but homes where children would grow up with stability, where parents could build equity instead of just paying rent, where communities could form and flourish. Emma and Lily ran ahead of the adults, greeting residents they'd met during construction, and marveling at how different the space looked now that it was fully inhabited. Gardens bloomed in front yards, children played on sidewalks, and neighbors chatted on front porches in the kind of spontaneous community interactions that successful development was meant to facilitate. "You did this," Theodore told Marcus as they watched their daughters playing with a group of local children who'd joined an impromptu game of tag. "You took an idea and made it real." Marcus shook his head. "We did this. All of us. The families who moved in, the workers who built it, Emma and Lily who reminded us why it mattered. Even Victoria Sterling, in her way. None of it would have happened if we hadn't learned to trust each other." Theodore nodded, understanding that Marcus was referring not just to the housing project, but to the broader relationship between their families. The investigation that had initially damaged their trust had ultimately led to deeper honesty about their motivations and expectations. The media attention that had threatened their privacy had actually strengthened their commitment to authentic friendship over manufactured image. As the afternoon celebration continued around them, both men found themselves reflecting on how much their lives had changed since that February morning when Marcus had pulled Emma from an overturned school bus. The rescue had lasted only minutes, but the relationship that grew from it had transformed both families in ways they were still discovering. Emma approached them as the sun began to set, grass stains on her school clothes and joy radiating from her face. "Marcus, Lily and I have been talking, and we want to ask you something." Marcus smiled at her serious tone. "What is it, Emma?" "We want to start a foundation for kids whose parents can't afford educational opportunities. Not just money for tuition, but programs that help families understand how to navigate college applications and financial aid and all that complicated stuff." Marcus looked at Theodore, who was clearly hearing about this idea for the first time but seemed intrigued rather than surprised. "We figured," Lily continued, joining the conversation, "that Emma knows about having advantages but not knowing how to appreciate them, and I know about wanting opportunities but not knowing how to get them. Together, we could help other kids figure out both sides." The proposal was ambitious and thoughtful, reflecting both girls' growing understanding of how privilege and disadvantage intersected in educational systems. More importantly, it demonstrated that their friendship had given them not just personal happiness, but a sense of shared purpose that extended beyond their individual circumstances. "I think," Theodore said slowly, "that might be the best idea I've heard in years." Marcus agreed, recognizing that the foundation idea represented everything their relationship had taught them about crossing boundaries, sharing resources, and using advantages to create opportunities for others. As they walked back toward their cars through the housing development that had brought them together, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. Not because their story was ending, but because it had evolved into something sustainable and meaningful that would continue growing long after the initial circumstances that created it were forgotten. Emma and Lily were already making plans for their foundation, their voices animated with excitement about helping other kids navigate the complex relationship between dreams and opportunities. Theodore was discussing potential funding sources and administrative structures, his business mind engaged by the challenge of creating lasting change through careful planning. Marcus listened to their conversations with quiet satisfaction, understanding that the best stories don't end with dramatic conclusions, but with new beginnings that honor what came before, while reaching toward what might be possible. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of kindness that ripple outward in ways no one could predict, creating connections that transform everyone involved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.